In this video, we're going to talk about filling out a recipe costing form. So this is certainly not a universal form, but it's one that you can use to do all the recipe costing on an entire recipe. So the one your book has in it looks like this, and we're going to step through each part of how to use that form. So the first thing is filling out that revised recipe quantity. And by the way, before I keep going, I want to make sure you know that there's nothing new in this recipe costing form. So all of these calculations that we're about to do, you've done before. It's just that you've done them separately. So now we're sort of bringing everything together. But there's no new calculations here. So the revised recipe quantity is just taking the EP quantity, the recipe quantity here, and making it into the same units as the purchasing cost units. So those are in pounds, our chicken breasts are in each. So we want to take that EP quantity and make it into the same units as the AP. So I just did this one in my head. You could do it out the way we've done the long form ones, but since the chicken breasts are 8 ounces each, that's half a pound each. So if you have 32, you're going to have 16 pounds of chicken breasts. So now we've got our revised recipe quantity. And of course, because there's no need for a yield percent, because there's 100% yield on chicken breasts, uh, then we just transfer that 16-pound quantity right over to the AP quantity. And then we take that AP quantity and multiply by the cost per pound, and we get our ingredient cost for that individual ingredient. So we're doing lime juice this time. This one's a little more complicated. So we still want to move from EP pints over into each because we've got a cost for each lime. So this is one of the ones that we talked about in an earlier video where if we pick the correct column on the book of yields, we can skip over the revised recipe quantity. So we can go straight from recipe quantity or EP straight over to AP quantity. And the way we do it on limes is look at this thing here. It says trimmed clean cups per AP unit. And this is an entry in the book of yields for lime juice. So we know we're talking about actual juice here. So cups of juice per AP unit, and the AP unit is each. So that's cups of juice per lime. So that's going to give us our conversion from pints to AP each. So I just made my pints into cups. You can do that in your head, of course. And then I'm going 2 cups EP. This is the thing I got out of the book of yields. 1 lime gives us 0.17 cups EP. Notice I'm labeling my EP and AP. So then I come up with 11.76 each AP. Now, remember when we talked about this before, I said that this might seem like sort of an absurd thing. You're not going to order from your vendor 11.76 limes. But remember, we're trying to cost out this recipe, so we use decimal numbers that might otherwise seem kind of absurd. Okay, so then we just take our 11.76 limes, multiply by $0.42 each, and we get our ingredient cost. Remember we talked about before that sometimes we'll keep some extra decimals just so that when we're in the middle of a process, we're going to eventually total up the total recipe cost. And so it's good to have, you'll cause less of a rounding error if you keep more decimals on your ingredient costs. Okay, so when we get to that total recipe cost down at the bottom of the form, So then we're going to use that to figure out cost per portion. So we take our total recipe cost, then we look up here and see that we've got 32 portions that the recipe makes. And so we just use our formula from before, total recipe cost divided by number of portions gives us cost per portion. So we do the division, we get $3.55 per portion. I think on this next slide I put the actual decimal, kept the decimals, so it actually came out 3.5488. So then the next thing we want to do, so in this case, we decided on a selling price, $12.95, and we want to find out what our food cost percent is. So we use our food cost percent formula, plug in the cost per portion and the selling price, solve our proportion formula like usual, and we come up with 27.4% food cost. So that goes up there, and we're now finished filling out the recipe costing form.